James and the Coaches introduces us to a real fan favorite. Takes more than one episode to make a good character, of course, but this is where we start. This is going to be a short review of Thomas and Friends episode 8. Timestamps on screen. We're going to do a quick walkthrough right now, and reviews coming after. We start this episode with a quick intro to James. He's enjoying his life on the island, but he still has a lot to learn. Sir Topham Hatt tells him that he's a mixed traffic engine, and so he can pull coaches or trucks easily. But he needs to learn from his mistakes. James understood this, remembering his accident on his first day. Today, James and Edward are double-heading a passenger train, and Edward is acting as something of a mentor here, reminding James to be careful with his coaches. James is already busy thinking about how great he is. People came to see him in his shiny red paint. He let off steam on the platform, throwing water onto the Fat Controller's hat. Just then, the guard blew his whistle, and James rushes out with the train. Edward tells him to be careful, but he's not listening. They even overrun a station platform, having to stop and reverse in. He was still worried, but he felt more at ease now that he was away from Sir Topham Hatt. Then, they came to Thomas's station. Thomas greeted James, happy to see him feeling better, but he had to take off quickly, as his guard's whistle blew. Thomas carries himself a little bit differently in this conversation. He's still eager to prove himself and a bit full of himself, but most importantly, he's confident. More on that later. Back with James and Edward, they passed the field where James had crashed. The fence was fixed and the cows had come home. At the end of their journey, they had to rest before their return trip. James was still worried about being in trouble. Edward seems to not even know what's going on, and he just wants to do work and do the work well. When they did get home, Sir Topham Hatt did have something to say. He threatened to take away James's red paint and make him blue. James hated the idea, and took out his anger on the coaches for his next train. He bumped them hard and told them to be quiet and come along. He was angry that he had to collect his own train, and even more angry when no one came to see him. James thought he had to prove something, and he tried. He did prove something, just not what he had hoped. James tried to pick up speed, but the coaches weren't having it, dragging him to a stop. His crew got down and found the problem. A leak in a brake pipe. They knew they could make it work, and searched for some newspaper and bootlaces to make a sort of seal. They asked the passengers, and one of them had to be peer pressured into giving up his bootlace so the train could go on. Everyone was angry with James and his crew, and as the narrator put it, James went home a sadder and wiser engine. He was careful to never bump coaches again. Review time. The music is great, as always. James's theme is fantastic. It's got a sort of bouncy feeling. I'm not sure how to describe it, but the song stands out in a show that's known for its suspiciously good music. When James and Edward are taking their train, that song is a mix of the two characters' themes. It's really good, and I love the use of it. It's not quite as pleasing as the individual character themes, but in this episode, this was the perfect use of something like that. Visuals here are nothing special as far as this series goes. I like the close-up shots of the crew and passengers. The variety of human figures is nice. It's not just guys in blue jackets. Even if they are all the same shape, it's a step up. Oh, also we see what I believe is dry-off for a moment here. This is a bit strange to me. Why is this heavy mainline commuter service on Thomas's branch line, and how did it get off the branch to meet Thomas later? That's more of a continuity error than a visual problem, I suppose. There was also a short flashback to last episode that's different than how a lot of shows do it. Most shows will make the flashback in black and white, or do audio distortion or something here. Here, it's just a memory in full color with a blue or white sort of fog at the edges of the screen. I thought it was worth mentioning as something that stands out. I don't really have a positive or negative feeling towards it. On to the story, it's kind of a rehash of the first part of Thomas's character arc. It was well made, and it doesn't feel that way until you think about it. I probably wouldn't have noticed this if the unlucky Tug hadn't mentioned it in one of his videos. I can't say it's any better than mediocre, because it's kind of a lazy copy of something that's already been made. That said, it does do something for each of the characters that appear, and, generally it's a comfortable story. Edward seemed almost oblivious to whatever was going on with James here, but he's taking the role of a mentor again, and he seems happy to do so. It's interesting to me that Edward is good at every kind of work, given he is intended to be a passenger engine, an express engine at that. As we know, he just wants to be busy, so it's not much of a surprise that he'll do whatever work you put in front of him. You can't really call this growth. He was a mentor before, but it's solidified here that it's part of his character. He likes to teach, and he wants others to do well. With the Fat Controller, we get a good amount from him, even though he only speaks twice. Firstly, he talks to James at the start of the episode, not holding his accident against him, but saying that he has the potential to do any type of work and needs to learn, so he'll work with Edward today. This is a positive interaction. Then James throws water at him and performs very poorly on the train with Edward because he's too busy worrying to do his job. The second time he speaks in this episode is spent scolding James, threatening to paint James blue and then walking away without punishing him. He's angry in the moment, but he's given James another chance to do well. Thomas appears in this episode for like 5 seconds, but he seems a little more mellowed out, more responsible, more confident. Obviously, he's still full of himself. More so than ever, arguably. But he's happy. He's happy to see James feeling better. He's happy to be on his branch line. He's still who he always was, just more confident, more comfortable. This is maturing. It's maturing in a very visible way. It's not like over the top, totally different character, and it's not no change, like we're stuck with the status quo as it becomes later in the series. This is Thomas being better than he was, but still him. Now for the big one. Let's talk about James. He does want to be useful, but he seems more concerned about literally everything else. He wants to escape when he soaks the Fat Controller's hat, seemingly forgetting the Fat Controller could have trapped him where he stands, and it would be better to have handled it all at the platform. Then again, guard's whistle blew. The risk of losing his red paint is really uncomfortable to him. He does understand what he did is wrong, and he does feel bad about it. He's not some antagonist, he's just far too arrogant for his own good. And then the next day, when nobody comes to see him, he gets even more angry. He implies that he's better than Gordon just because of his paint. Then, he breaks his coach's brake pipe because he's treated them so poorly. He cares more about what people think of him than he cares about his work. In a person, this sort of attitude will make you hate them. But a lot of people love this character for these reasons. There's something endearing about his insecurity. Plus, it's pretty impressive that he managed to make a fool of himself twice in one episode. It's only 4.5 minutes if you take off the intro and outro. The character progression and music in this episode are really good. James is an interesting character, and we just know at the end of this episode he got himself into some big trouble. But the story being something of a lazy rehash means I can't rank it super high. I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. I very nearly gave it a 6, and I considered a 6.5, but I'm trying to keep the numbers whole, and it's really good, actually, when you don't think about the story structure as much as I did. Feel free to argue with me in the comments. My mind can be changed. If you have any ideas for topics to cover instead of episodes, let me know and I'll look into it. I'm gonna need a break from taking episodes eventually, especially when they start to get longer. Aside from that, click on these end cards here. There's a playlist with all of the reviews up until this point. Like, subscribe, hang around. Thanks for watching. I'll be back in a week.